In 1543, barbarians from the west, known as the Portuguese, landed on Tanegashima, an island off the coast of Shimazu. In the 15th century, the Islamic Turkish Ottoman Empire was on the rise, and they decided to ban Europe from the spice trade, except for Italian trading republics like Venice. Europe was furious at this development, so this caused the Iberian nations of Spain and Portugal to go exploring to find new trade routes to Asia, and sailed all the way around Africa to reach India and China. Portugal established ports all over Africa and Asia, and was for a time the biggest trader in the world. This is when a fleet of Portuguese traders in China were informed of the existence of Japan, so they went looking for Japan. And this is when they stumbled on the island of Tanegashima, establishing the non-ban trade in the process. But with trade comes religion. Missionaries from Portugal flooded Japan trying to spread the word of God to anyone that they came across, even if they didn't want it. The missionaries were initially very successful in converting people to Christianity, even being able to convert some daimyo. The arrival of Portugal in Japan is important for two reasons: guns and Christianity. Firearms revolutionized Japanese warfare, and Christianity created insurgencies and rivalries between daimyo. Now in Shikoku, the Miyoshi clan were originally retainers of the now stumbling Hosokawa clan, who based themselves on Awa province in Shikoku. After the Onin War, the Hosokawa were deeply divided into the Hosokawa controlled by Takakuni and the one controlled by Harumoto. This led to a power struggle that weakened their authority. The first ones to go were the Ichijo in Tosa. However, the most important one of these were the Miyoshi's independence. Miyoshi Motonaga initially supported Hosokawa Harumoto against Takakuni in Kyoto. In 1531, Miyoshi Motonaga helped Hosokawa Harumoto win the Battle of Daimotsu, killing Takakuni and making Harumoto the dominant Hosokawa lord. However, Harumoto feared Motonaga and turned against him, executing him in 1532. Motonaga's son, Miyoshi Nagayoshi, took over. Nagayoshi initially pretended to serve Harumoto, but secretly began consolidating power in Setsu. In 1543, Nagayoshi rebelled against Harumoto. Harumoto fled to Kyoto, but by 1549, Nagayoshi marched towards the capital. When he got there, he installed Ashikaga Yoshiteru as a puppet shogun. By 1551, Takeda Shingen had conquered almost all of Shinano, but all was not well for Shingen, as his capture of the castles Hayashi, Kiribara, and Fukashi, as well as his siege of Toishi, caused the intervention of the newly invigorated Uesugi clan. During the early 16th century, the Uesugi Yamanouchi clan leader Uesugi Norimasa was driven out of the Kanto region by the rising power of the Hojo clan. As such, he adopted a boy from Echigo and named him his heir. The boy he adopted was none other than Uesugi Kenshin. Kenshin grew up to become a brilliant military leader. Kenshin was a master of battlefield tactics, known for his ability to respond swiftly to enemy movements. Kenshin excelled in infantry-based maneuvers, ambushes, and rapid assaults. He was known for his unpredictability. He would shift between diplomacy and warfare strategically. Sometimes he would send gifts to Shingen, demonstrating that he was not just a warrior, but also a skilled psychological tactician, someone to match Shingen in skill. It is in September of 1553 that these two face each other on the Kawanakajima Plain, a vital crossroad between Takeda-controlled Shinano and Uesugi-controlled Echigo. The battle commenced near Hachima Shrine. He met Kenshin's army there, but refused to engage and left. The two armies touched each other again a few kilometers north, but no engagement. In October, Kenshin finally attacked Shingen near Hachima and defeated the Takeda, ending the first battle at Kawanakajima and forcing Shingen to retreat. However, Shingen would not be let off so easily, and tried again in 1555 in the second battle. He managed to advance across the plain until reaching the Saigawa River. He later made camp in Otsuka Hill just south of the river. Kenshin's army met Shingen on the other side, where he also made camp. They both waited for the other one to attack, but both did not engage. They lasted 4 months before withdrawing, but Shingen was still determined to reach Echigo. So he invaded once again and captured the fortress of Katsurayama deep into Uesugi territory. He then attacked Liyama Castle, which lay along a major road into Echigo, and northeast of the Sengoku Castle, where Kenshin's army was based. Kenshin prepared a counterattack, and Shingen promptly withdrew from Liyama. Ever since the fall of the Hosokawa and Yamana, the Ouchi clan was the hegemon of the West. The Ouchi were the premier Japanese trader with China. This made them the Western daimyo with the most wealth and biggest army. The Ouchi was a force to be reckoned with. Since they controlled the Kanmon Strait, they had control of what ships entered and left Kyushu. But this power would not last, as a coup would put an abrupt end to the prosperity of the Ouchi clan. In 1551, Sue Takafusa rebelled against Ouchi Yoshitaka and installed Yoshinaga as a puppet ruler. Trade with China swiftly ended as the Chinese did not recognize the usurper's claim to the daimyo. The China trade was quickly filled by pirates and the Portuguese. Motonari pretended to be loyal to Sue while secretly strengthening his position. The Mori had been allied with the Ouchi, but now they had to decide whether to support Sue or resist him. By 1554, Motonari was strong enough to rebel openly. He formed an alliance with the Otomo clan to keep Sue's forces distracted. Sue's forces occupied the sacred island of Miyajima, believing it to be a fortified position. He had ordered a fort built there, then publicly lamented that he could hardly hope to hold it for long. In October 1555, Motonari's army finally came. First, Motonari tricked Sue into overextending his forces, then he landed secretly in the middle of the night while there was a thunderstorm. He then struck in complete surprise. Sue's army was completely destroyed, and Sue tried to flee the island. However, Motonari's allied navies were waiting for him. Sue's fleet was completely destroyed, and Sue committed seppuku. This battle proved Motonari's brilliance, and now Mori Motonari, once a minor vassal of the Ouchi, was now a prominent regional leader. Motonari was not satisfied, however, and 2 years later he turned against the Ouchi, swiftly reaching Nagayama Castle. Yoshinaga committed seppuku, and Motonari absorbed all of the Ouchi's lands. In 1560, an event so monumental in scale that it would define the rest of the Sengoku Jidai played out. Just to the west of the Imagawa, in Owari province, resided a clan by the name of Oda. Throughout the 16th century, the Oda were at war with pretty much all of its neighbors. In 1551, Nobuhide, the daimyo of Oda, would die, leaving his illegitimate son, Nobuhiro, as heir. This caused the rebellion of many small groups throughout Owari, unwilling to follow the illegitimate son or the legitimate one. It was up to the legitimate son, at the time known as the Fool of Owari, Oda Nobunaga, to pick up the shattered pieces of the Oda and paste them back together. Nobunaga was an incredible leader, being a pioneer in firearm tactics, having a deep knowledge of logistics and incredible diplomatic abilities. Nobuhiro, due to being illegitimate, was forced to submit to his brother. Nobunaga was able to quell the rebellion, but unfortunately for Nobunaga, a new development was brewing, as the neighboring Saito clan was in civil war between Nobunaga's father-in-law, Saito Dosan, and Saito Yoshitatsu. Nobunaga would end up backing his father-in-law, the losing side. Yoshitatsu assumed full control of Mino and would become his enemy. In 1557, Nobunaga still faced problems as his brother Nobuyuki conspired against him. Nobunaga remained victorious, though he would forgive his brother. Nobuyuki was not done scheming, however, and Nobunaga sent an army to kill his brother, sending the message that he was the dominant force in the province. In 1558, the performance of a young Ashigado peasant impressed Nobunaga enough to make him samurai. His name was Kinoshita Tokichiro, later known as Hashiba Hideyoshi. The loyalty province of Owari soon went away, though the years of civil war had taken its toll. And in this weak position, the Imagawa invaded Owari. The Imagawa, controlled by Yoshimoto, were one of the most stable clans during the Sengoku Jidai and had survived many wars with all of its neighbors. However, Yoshimoto's poor military abilities led to the failure of each campaign. Yoshimoto was skilled in diplomacy and politics, which inspired him to conquer Kyoto, ending the Sengoku Jidai in the process. Yoshimoto used his diplomatic skill to form a three-way alliance with the Takeda under Shingen and the Hojo under Ieyasu. That way, he could focus on his campaign in Kyoto, although before he could even start, his main commander died. Although all was not lost for Matsudaira Motoyasu, however. The man who would one day unify all of Japan was in charge of the armies. So with everything secured in 1560, Yoshimoto began his plan. Yoshimoto and Motoyasu entered Owari with 25,000 men. Initially, they scored decisive victories against the Oda. With the Oda close to collapse, Yoshimoto brought his army to a forest known as Okehasama. There, he paused for a head viewing ceremony. With the Oda close to capitulation, Nobunaga planned to attack Yoshimoto at Okehasama. When he arrived at the forest, he ordered a small group to erect hundreds of banners opposite to Yoshimoto, which tricked the Imagawa to think that was the main body of the army. After fooling the Imagawa, Nobunaga marched his army at midnight towards Yoshimoto. It seems that fate was on Nobunaga's side, as that day a thunderstorm erupted. At night, with perfect weather, the Imagawa scouts failed to spot the incoming Oda. Near dawn, Nobunaga charged towards the unprepared Imagawa. The Imagawa outnumbered the Oda by as much as 12 to 1, but since many were still sleeping, unarmed, or drunk, the Imagawa were unequipped to deal such an attack. Before Yoshimoto was even able to defend himself, he was cut down and decapitated. Nobunaga was now no longer a fool, and with a now severely weakened Imagawa, Motoyasu began seeking the independence of the Matsudaira clan. Since the end of the third battle of Kawanakajima, Shingen was waiting to strike back at Kenshin. In 1561, Kenshin went to war with the Hojo, capturing Matsuyama, along with Kamakura, before preparing to head to Odawara, the capital. Sieging Odawara proved to be more difficult than first seemed, and Kenshin became stuck. With a distracted Uesugi, Shingen marched into Kosuke, threatening to move his army to Echigo. With no progress at Odawara and the Takeda threat, Kenshin withdrew from the castle. Yet it is then that Shingen marched into Kawanakajima once again. Since the third battle, Takeda activity in Kawanakajima increased, and now many castles that were once independent were controlled by the Takeda. Before, Kawanakajima proved to be a reliable frontier between the Takeda and Uesugi, but now Kenshin had to play more carefully this time. By June, Shingen marched towards Warigadake Castle in Kawanakajima, just to the border of Echigo. In response to the capture of Warigadake, Kenshin marched on to Kaisu. He took position at Saijo-san Hill, ready to storm the castle. Shingen was notified immediately of Kenshin's movements and made haste to meet him. He positioned himself on the west bank of the Chikamagawa River. Both sat between the river doing nothing for days, until Shingen decided to move to Kaisu. Once inside, he consolidated his generals on how to remove Kenshin off of the hill, and they decided that an element of surprise was all they needed to throw Kenshin off the hill. Yamamoto Kansuke, one of his top generals, had devised an interesting plan known as Operation Woodpecker. Shingen's army were to be split into two. One army would climb the Saijo-yama at night and tap on Kenshin's force before retreating, and Shingen would be positioned on the plain while in the crane's wing formation. That way, they would lure Kenshin off the hill with minimal losses. Initially, the plan would go perfectly. However, as the first army went up the hill, Kenshin's force was nowhere to be found. Kenshin had actually left the hill early in the night, positioning himself just south of where Shingen was. When dawn came, Kenshin charged at Shingen's left flank. As the Uesugi slowed down, more men poured into the battle, and then more Uesugi troops struck Shingen's right flank. This strategy allowed Kenshin to break Shingen's front line. Eventually, Kenshin met Shingen in person while mounted. With Kenshin running towards him, Shingen tried to draw his sword as quickly as possible, but unable to do so, he used his fan to parry his slashes, until Kenshin got tired and fled. As it seemed certain defeat for the Takeda, the first army rushed towards Kenshin in hopes of breaking the Uesugi line. Kenshin expected this and left 1,000 men to guard the army's back. However, the first army still managed to push through. Now Kenshin was outnumbered himself and retreated. While the battle was technically still a Takeda victory, since Kenshin retreated, the heavy casualties taken by the Takeda prevented Shingen from going north. The fourth battle of Kawanakajima went down as the bloodiest battle in the Sengoku Jidai. Shingen and Kenshin would not meet each other again until 3 years later, although by then, the Takeda had almost complete control of Kawanakajima. Thus, when they met, Kenshin decided not to engage. Instead, it was a repeat of the second battle, and just sat across the river until Kenshin retreated. Both Kenshin and Shingen greatly learned from this experience, and they would never clash with each other again. After Okahasama, the Imagawa clan was severely weakened. As such, the Matsudaira offered the Oda a secret alliance to strike at the Imagawa. And that time came as the death of Yoshitaka caused a civil war. Motoyasu and Nobunaga launched a combined offense. Motoyasu won the war, and when he finally became independent, he used his imperial leverage to change the name of the clan to Tokugawa. With that, he also changed his name from Motoyasu to Ieyasu. After independence, the Imagawa would further weaken, and eventually the Takeda would take Suruga and the Tokugawa would take Totomi. In 1561, the Amago leader died, causing instability in Izumo. In 1564, Mori Motonari invaded Izumo. Once again, he found himself at the walls of Gasantoda. He initially failed to take the castle, but Motonari was determined. He implemented a different strategy. Instead of attacking the fortress directly, he simply decided to starve out the fort. Although Gasantora was cut out of supply line, the fort's leader refused to surrender. However, Motonari had another trick down his sleeve. Since Gasantoda was seriously missing food, many deserted. Motonari, however, would not let them leave, starving the forces further. As months went by, more deserters grew, and Motonari finally let starved-out soldiers leave the fort. In 1566, so many left that there was not enough men to defend the fort, and Gasantoda leaders had no choice but to surrender. After Gasantoda, the Amago completely collapsed, and the Mori conquered all remaining provinces. Chugoku was now completely under Mori control. In 1564, Miyoshi Nagayoshi died. As a result, the Miyoshi went into a period of decline. 1 year after Nagayoshi's death, the Miyoshi puppet shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru was assassinated by Matsunaga Hisahide. With Miyoshi control weakened, Matsunaga Hisahide installed Ashikaga Yoshihide. However, their power was shaky, and Yoshihide never fully controlled Kyoto. It is here where Nobunaga stepped into Kyoto. With the end of the Imagawa, Nobunaga marched into the Saito clan territory. He advanced quickly into Mino, conquering Inabayama Castle by 1567. Inabayama was renamed by Nobunaga to Gifu. Nobunaga's victory secured a key strategic position and a clear road to Kyoto. It is in this campaign that Nobunaga promoted the young samurai Kinoshita Tokichiro to a commander. And with that, Tokichiro changed his name to Hashiba Hideyoshi. In 1568, Nobunaga quickly advanced towards the capital, crushing the once prominent Rokaku clan and forming an alliance with the nearby Asai. He installed Ashikaga Yoshiaki as a puppet shogun, but Nobunaga did not stop at just Kyoto and conquered the Itabatake clan just south of Owari. For many clans in central Japan, it was a choice of whether they would side with the Oda and become their vassals, or whether they would oppose him and get destroyed. Nobunaga's next target was the Miyoshi-held provinces in central Japan. He would pressure Yoshiaki into requesting that all daimyo in central Japan come to Kyoto. Any who did not attend would be seen as enemies, all except the Asakura. You see, Yoshiaki wasn't planning to be another puppet shogun, but as Oda presence in Kyoto solidified, it seemed that he was supposed to be a puppet. So since Yoshiaki, before becoming shogun, used to be part of the Asakura, the Oda began to suspect him. This was all Nobunaga needed to declare the Asakura enemies of the state. He assembled his forces to fight the Asakura, but before he could reach Asakura territory, they had to pass through Asai control only. Nobunaga assumed that since they were allied, the Asai would let them pass through. However, the Asai were longtime allies of the Asakura, and eventually came to the hard decision to side with the Asakura. Nobunaga was now surrounded in enemy territory and had to retreat, but he would try again. With Nobunaga's absence, the Rokaku clan would try to retake lost territory. However, Shibata Katsuya was able to repel them, and their loss would eventually force them into submission. Nobunaga quickly moved to Anegawa, where a combined Asai-Asakura force was waiting for him. However, when he finally arrived, the Asai-Asakura forces turned back, but that was merely a trap. and by night, the Asaya Sakura armies reappeared. Fortunately, Oda scouts tracked Asaya Sakura movements. The Oda and Tokugawa would win the battle, yet his forces would be diminished, and he would be forced to take his attention elsewhere. The conquest of Kyoto created a bunch of new enemies, including the Iko-Iki Buddhist radicals, who controlled various temples in the region and were based on the temple fortress of Ishiyama Honganji. Osaka Ishiyama Honganji Temple was originally the place where the chief priest Renyo chose as his retreat. Called Ishiyama-go after the Onin War, the temple became heavily fortified, making it incredibly hard to take. As conflicts soon arose between the Iko-Iki and the Oda, Kenyo issued a manifesto to his believers declaring that Nobunaga was an enemy of Buddha. By the time of the declaration, Nobunaga was pushing the Miyoshi out of Honshu, reaching Osaka where Honganjin was based. Nobunaga and Mitsuhide began the siege to take the temple. The Iko-Iki, however, were formidable warriors and also heavily used firearms like Nobunaga. The Iko-Iki would also kill Nobunaga's brother in battle. And frustrated, when he finally took Mount Hiei, he ordered his soldiers to kill anyone coming to the temple, and when his forces reached the top, he lit the temple on fire. On July 6th, the legendary Mori Motonari died, giving control to his grandson, Mori Terumoto. Terumoto was a competent but overly cautious leader. While he inherited a clan at the peak of its power, his indecisiveness and strategic choices ultimately led to the decline of the Mori clan's influence. The new puppet shogun, Yoshiaki, was dissatisfied with Oda rule and persuaded the Takeda to go to war. By 1572, the Takeda were at the peak of their power, and by now the situation in the east seemed to be rather stable, as Hojo Ujiyasu had died, and Kenshin was not inclined to go to war with the Takeda. This only left the west for expansion. But before Shingen could move onto Oda territory, he would have to defeat the Tokugawa first. Shingen entrusted his son Katsuyori to take Hamamatsu. Ieyasu responded swiftly, and by 1573, marching towards Mikatakahara near Hamamatsu, there he engaged Shingen on open field. Ieyasu began the battle by opening fire to the Takeda. He hoped that if he implemented firearms, the Takeda would be discouraged to charge with cavalry, which worked initially. Shingen would instead order a general samurai charge against the Tokugawa line. However, as the Tokugawa were busy defending against the samurai, Shingen started ordering cavalry charges. As Takeda forces began closing in on Ieyasu, he still tried to order commands. It is when Yoshinobu tried to convince Ieyasu to retreat. However, he would refuse. In response, Yoshinobu would mount Ieyasu's horse and try to run back towards the castle while screaming that he was Ieyasu. The Takeda would kill Yoshinobu believing he was Ieyasu, and with Yoshinobu gone, Ieyasu ran back towards the castle. But when he got to the castle, instead of closing the gate as soon as possible, they would leave it open, in hopes the Takeda viewed it as a trap, which worked, and the Takeda would camp outside watching how the castle developed. The Tokugawa would launch a successful raid against a small contingency. As winter was arriving, Shingen decided to retreat from Hamamatsu and wait for spring when he would try to storm the castle. That day would never come, however, as shortly after Mikatakahara, Shingen would die. It is reported that when Kenshin learned about the death of his rival, he cried at the death of such a worthy opponent. In 1573, Ashiaka Yoshiaki's true intentions were shown, as Yoshiaki attempted to rebel, but the emperor intervened, demanding a truce between the Oda and Yoshiaki. However, when Nobunaga and Hideyoshi attempted a failed siege at Nagashima, Yoshiaki tried to rebel again. This time, he marched his army to Uji Bridge, hoping that the Asai, Asakura, and Iko-Iki would launch assaults of their own. However, none of them were able to attack before he arrived. Nobunaga crushed his army easily and advanced into Nijo Castle. Defeated, Yoshiaki surrendered and begged to let him keep his life, which Nobunaga accepted, however, at the cost of ending his position as shogun. With Yoshiaki stepping down, the Ashikaga shogunate would finally come to an end. Now, with full control of the capital, Nobunaga could finally push on towards his enemies in central Japan. He invaded the Asakura army in an ambush and marched onto Odani. As Oda forces were quickly heading into Echizen, Asakura Yoshikage committed seppuku, destroying the Asakura in the process. With them gone, fresh Oda troops marched onto Odani, as the Oda were at the gates of the Asai. Asai Nagamas, knowing his situation was hopeless, committed seppuku. After the conquest, the lands were divided between his generals, with Omi being given to Hideyoshi. In 1574, the Takeda strike once again, marching towards Takatenjin Castle. 1 year later, Katsuyori attacked Nagashino, a Tokugawa outpost in Mikawa. Okudaira Sadamasa was waiting for the Takeda outside the castle. Despite fierce resistance, the Takeda managed to push them back to the castle. With the fortress about to fall, Ieyasu sought help from Nobunaga and began the standoff. Nobunaga realized the Takeda cavalry was deadly in open battle, so he devised a new tactic. He set up wooden barracks around the plain and prepared an arquebus-based defense, so when the Takeda cavalry charged the Oda, the horsemen would be met by a volley of fire. And luckily for Nobunaga, Katsuyori did just that, ordering a cavalry charge directly at the fortified Oda forces. The Oda and Tokugawa fired their guns continuously for approximately 9 hours, bombarding the Takeda forces with a seemingly inexhaustible supply of ammunition. The Takeda suffered a devastating loss with over 10,000 casualties, including many of their elite samurai and generals. This devastating loss led to the previously stable Takeda clan falling into instability and eventually lead to the end of their clan. Since the death of Shingen, Kenshin set out to expand in all surrounding provinces, expanding towards Echu and Noto. The recent expansion into these western provinces was an attempt by the Uesugi to try to secure the western border, as Nobunaga's rising power threatened Uesugi control. Wishing to remove the Uesugi from Noto, Nobunaga dispatched an army to relieve Nanao Castle. Kenshin, as always, was initially hesitant to engage Nobunaga, and waited until Nanao was under his full control. When Nanao finally fell, the Oda withdrew. Nobunaga initially believed that Uesugi Kenshin would not march south to engage his forces directly. However, Nobunaga severely underestimated Kenshin, and he outmaneuvered him and positioned himself at Tedorigawa. Kenshin tricked Nobunaga into launching a frontal attack across the Tedorigawa and defeated him. Having suffered 1,000 losses, the Oda withdrew. Shortly after the battle, Kenshin would die suddenly. You see, Kenshin was a bit of an alcoholic, frequenting the sultans often. But there was a reason for this, as Kenshin was a devout follower of Bishamonte, the god of war, and reportedly believed that drinking sake was a form of ritual offering. It is believed that his drink habit contributed to a development of a stomach cancer, as he reportedly suffered from stomach problems later in his life. Since Kenshin was a very religious man, he never married, and it is possible he even embraced celibacy. So in 1578, Kenshin died without a biological heir. However, he did kind of pronounce an heir, as he had an adopted son, Uesugi Kagetora, originally born into the Hojo clan, would be adopted by Kenshin during his invasion of Musashi. However, the Uesugi retainers preferred Kenshin's nephew, Uesugi Kagekatsu. Conflict soon arose after Kenshin's death. A civil war was started, which Kagekatsu eventually won. But now, the Uesugi were severely weakened. They lost control of almost all territory outside of Echigo, which led to their decline. In the west, conflict between the Oda and Mori began in 1577, when Oda Nobunaga sent Hashiba Hideyoshi and Akechi Mitsuhide to conquer the west. Hideyoshi led a campaign along the road in the coast of the inland sea, while Mitsuhide followed the road along the Sea of Japan. Mitsuhide was quick to run into problems, as he rejected many of Nobunaga's orders and faced extreme resistance. In 1578, Mitsuhide tried to take out the Hatano by taking Yakami. However, in order to prepare for more attacks in the territory, he chose to let them surrender peacefully. And as a bargaining chip for surrender, he offered his mother as a hostage and let Hatano Hideharu leave. In 1579, Mitsuhide then moved on to Tango and would eventually succeed. But when he finally toppled the clan, Mitsuhide would learn that Nobunaga executed Hatano Hideharu, and with his mother still in Hatano custody, Hatano samurais murdered Mitsuhide's mother. This contributed to Mitsuhide's and Nobunaga's already tenuous relationship, and he would eventually grow to despise Nobunaga. For Hideyoshi, things were going great, as he managed to make quick progress, reaching Kozuki by late 1577. However, it was Kozuki that caused most problems for Hideyoshi, as it took multiple months to siege down. Even after taking Kozuki, Hideyoshi still faced problems, as each time he took the castle, the Mori would continuously retake it, and by 1578, Hideyoshi faced a bigger problem as the leader of the Beisho clan, Beisho Nagaharu, an Oda ally, would be displeased with Nobunaga's choice to make Hideyoshi the leader of the Mori. Nagaharu thought little of him, considering him just a peasant. As such, Nagaharu changed sides, allying with the Mori instead, and helping the Iko-Iki in Honganji. Hideyoshi responded swiftly by sieging Miki, but with Mori naval supplies, the castle would be holding out for some time. The Oda Navy would engage the Mori Navy in Kisugawa-Kuchi, which succeeded in destroying the Mori force. In 1580, Nagaharu surrendered. By now, the Iko-Iki were tired, and finally, after 10 years, they surrendered Honganji, ending the Ishiyama-Honganji War. After the conquest of Harima, the Oda would soon get beaten as well, as the Ukita would betray their Mori allies and make peace with Nobunaga, sending the young Ukita Hidei as a hostage. When the Ukita leader died, power was left to the 9-year-old Hidei, who would be adopted by Hideyoshi. While in the west there was substantial progress, Nobunaga still wished to march on to the Takeda. After the tremendous defeat at Nagashino, and now that the clan had lost Shingen and faced mounting instability, Nobunaga decided that 1582 was the opportune moment to strike. Nobunaga set out to finally conquer the Takeda once and for all. The Takeda tried to defend Mikawa, although by 1582, the Takeda were so weak that many commanders abandoned the clan in favor of the Oda. Eventually, the Oda would march all the way into Kai. Katsuyori would fight for the last time at Temo Kusai. His army fought bravely, however, he would be crushed and fled for his life. He was relentlessly pursued by the Takeda, and he committed seppuku shortly after the defeat. In 1582, after the Takeda conquest, an event took place that would change the course of history. Akechi Mitsuhide was one of Nobunaga's most accomplished commanders. However, Mitsuhide hated Nobunaga. Him and Nobunaga had different views and tactics, and constantly disagreed with each other. Nobunaga was known for his harsh treatment of subordinates, and this caused conflict with Mitsuhide. After the death of his mother, Mitsuhide came to despise Nobunaga and plotted against him. At Honoji, Mitsuhide struck by complete surprise, and a small battle ensued. Nobunaga's retainers were quickly overwhelmed, and the temple caught on fire. Realizing escape was impossible, Nobunaga fought briefly before committing seppuku. After Nobunaga's death, the Oda fell into chaos, as Nobunaga's general took control. After Honoji, Mitsuhide declared himself shogun and managed to hold on to the capital for a little while, before another legendary leader and one of Nobunaga's commanders marched onto the capital, a man who would later conquer all of Japan, before engaging Mitsuhide at the small village of Yamasaki.